Folks, Black worth is.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Monday, April 20th, 2026. I'm Candace Kelly, sitting in for Roland Martin this week. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. A shocking incident occurred early Sunday in Shreveport, Louisiana, where a man killed 8 children, 7 of his own kids, and 1 of their cousins in a mass shooting. This tragic event has sparked a conversation about the shooter's mental health based on claims made by his family. We will explore the difference between mental health and mental illness, particularly in relation to unspeakable crimes. This week, we are addressing the epidemic of fatal domestic violence by focusing on the underlying issues that lead to such tragedies. Tonight, we'll examine how parental suicides affect their children. We'll speak to Texas Representative Jolanda Jones about how her father's suicide impacted her life. And we'll have a psychologist on to explain how individuals can overcome such trauma. And despite Donald Trump's false claim that he saved HBCUs, he is actually overseeing the largest economic attack on historically Black colleges and universities in U.S. history. Journalist Michael Harriot will shed light on this issue. And Congressman Bobby Scott will join us to discuss why Virginians should vote yes on Tuesday's redistricting referendum. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
This country is trying to make sense of how a father could shoot his wife and kill 8 children, including 7 of his own kids. In what's being called one of the nation's deadliest mass shootings in recent years, family members are left to mourn 8 children. Jayla Elkins, 3 years old. Shayla Elkins, 5 years old. Braylon Snow, 5 years old. Kayla Pugh, 6 years old. Kadarian Snow, 6 years old. Layla Pugh, 7 years old. Markeadon Pugh, 10 years old. Soraya Snow, 11 years old. The shootings were carried out by a man identified as 31-year-old Shamar Elkins, a U.S. Army veteran, and began Sunday just after 6 a.m. following reports of a domestic disturbance. The shooting spree involved multiple scenes. His wife, Shaniqua Elkin, a woman who was identified as his girlfriend, they were also injured. And according to reports, the couple was separating and had been due in court on Monday. The two had been arguing about the separation before the shooting. This was a cruel and evil act, and Shamar's mental health has been the focal point of this investigation. Reports indicate that Elkins had, quote, dark thoughts before shooting and had previously shared posts on social media expressing his struggles with mental health issues. Once again, a tragedy sparks the conversation about mental health and mental illness. It's an uncomfortable conversation because a lot of folks are thinking that saying Elkins' mental health issues is an excuse for his actions, and it's not. Joining me now is Dr. Evan August, and he is the Assistant Professor of Psychology at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and we are going to discuss the difference between mental health and mental illness when it comes to heinous crimes. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. So, this is one of these things that has been talked about so much on social media. Let's just get down to the bottom of it. When we talk about mental health, when we talk about mental illness, where does it play when we talk about these heinous crimes that have taken place, not just in this situation, but these actually are occurring every single day? We're just not hearing them in the headlines the way that we are now. Mental health versus mental illness, how can you distinguish the two and how it relates to what we're seeing?
It's a great question, and I'm going to answer it like I do with my students, I think it's important that people understand that both mental health and mental illness are intentional cultural constructs. I say that to say, when we think about what it means to be well in a particular society, it's the culture, the values, the attitudes of that society that's going to shape that definition, right? And so when we think about what it means to be well in the context of the United States, Sigmund Freud, for example, would define that as the ability to love and the ability to work, right? When we think about what we've defined as mental illness, right, it's what the American society has tended to see as either illegitimate or not worthy of being within the public square. So because of that, I want to go a bit deeper, right? Linda James Myers helps us think about what she calls optimal conceptual theory. So as opposed to threading mental health and mental illness, she talks about the optimal and the suboptimal worldview, right? The optimal worldview is one that's shaped by many different indigenous peoples. She looks at African indigenous peoples that say health and wellness are rooted in communal value systems, diurnal structures, a self-worth that is intrinsic and necessarily relational, the ability to value and deeply honor other people. Whereas that suboptimal worldview, right, that suboptimal mindset is rooted in materialism, dominance, ownership. And so going all the way back to your question then, I think some of the reasons people struggle with the interaction between the conversation around mental health and when we see just horrendous tragedies like femicide in our world is because people tend to use mental health to, in conversations, to hold in place a lot of these organizing constructs. Right? When we think about optimal worldview, suboptimal worldview, we see, okay, how does distress then interact with these worldviews? If I have a suboptimal worldview, one that's been shaped by the dominant culture of patriarchy globally, right? My distress that I feel is going to interact with an overarching society that has told me that men are supposed to own women, that men are supposed to own children, right? And when I'm feeling this deep despair, right, my attempts to seek stability, health, reclaiming narrative, whatever have you, is going to lead to that deep type of violence. I want to say one quote from Dr. Ide Brown, who says, "Femicide is patriarchy's most extreme outcome. When she tries to leave, she's not leaving a relationship, she's escaping ownership." Right? So femicide is that interaction between that suboptimal worldview and that deep distress, if that makes sense.
No, and it does make sense. And, you know, this is something that I have been trained in. And so it makes sense to me. I mean, it might lose a few people along the way in terms of discussing the fact that you have people who have a value system that's been shaped by the culture that forces them to think that they should belong in certain spaces and places in the world because they are men. This is a patriarchal society. Did I get that right so far?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So then as a result of that, when there's certain things that encumber you, especially as a man, and we are talking about mostly men when we are talking about killing other women, right? Even though we know that men are also killed in domestic violence situations. But this is something that if there is a shortcoming that they can't provide, and then this brings on depression, and then this brings on isolationism, and there's a loss of power and control, and there's a loss of dominance, right? These are things that our society teaches us that men should be in control of. And often those can be triggers for things such as domestic violence situations. But I just want you to add a little bit of that and give more context to maybe what could have happened perhaps in the situation that we're seeing, for example, in Louisiana or in Virginia. How does all of that interplay?
It's a brilliant question. And my training is in forensic psychology. I have engaged in cases that have looked similar. And so because of this, I want to hesitate to speculate about the particulars of the case, but speak to, as you're mentioning, the overarching structure, right? In both of these cases, we have men that we know were on the path to file for divorce, right? And so that particular dynamic, right? Intentionally disrupting that narrative of, again, ownership. When we look at aspects of femicide, which is a global problem, right? This is not just in the US, it's globally. I believe that when we allow these narratives to take shape, when we allow our conversations of mental health to solely be those that allow these structures, these worldviews to stay in place, when people enter into that deep distress, right? The feeling that, oh, I'm losing this, not even able to fully see the other person as human. I'm losing this person that's supposed to be belong to me. Now I'm going to engage in the most severe, deep type of violence. Right? I think this is what we see, right? People who are at their absolute lowest, right? Trying to exercise whatever power and control that they can, and that looking like the erasure of Black women.
Right. And, you know, let's go back. I mean, when we talk about what this country was built upon and what we experience now, it be anything from salaries, between men and women and the differences. The fact that when the framers even wrote the Constitution that this country is based upon, women were in it. Black women certainly weren't in it. I mean, these are the foundations that we have built everything around, which is why Black women often feel like we are at the bottom because of the way that this society is now, a la the Tate brothers, right? This is someone who's making money off of misogyny, and he's getting millions of followers to buy into this idea. What is it, though, that you think we should take away from this in order to learn and help someone in this situation? Or can that even be done? What are the signs and what's our responsibility? Because we will hear neighbors that have issues and we are family members who see things that we don't like, maybe from a brother-in-law or an uncle. But where does that place us in the narrative?
It's a beautiful question. I'm thinking 3 to 4 things because it's a deep question, because we're talking about, again, a type of structure, a type of patriarchy that is historical, to your point, and global. The first piece, and I want to bring back to what I had mentioned, right, is mental health and healing paradigms that are rooted in restructuring, undoing that very conceptual system. It can't be that when we tell people, and I think people feel this, right, when we tell people, oh, go ahead and we need more conversations about mental health, but those conversations about mental health help people essentially feel comfortable or stress-free or calm within a conceptual system that we know is dangerous, right? That will only allow these things to progress. And so we need mental health paradigms. We need healing circles. We need healing collectives that are intentional about deconstructing this worldview such that when that deep type of distress interacts with that person's worldview, it doesn't result in femicide. So I want to holler out Marvin Tolliver has some great groups that he does. Black Men, Are You Okay? I want to holler out Kenji Summers, Meditations for Black Men Who Do Too Much. Beam, the Black Emotional Mental Health Collective, Black Masculinity Remixed. Each of these are tools, techniques, circles, collectives designed specifically to undo that worldview for Black men, not to just allow these things to stay in place. That's the first piece. The second piece I want to name is part of the way that we talk about these situations in media. I have a colleague, April Alexander, who I believe published a study last year who looked at when media narratives center the reasons or the explanations that Black men had for killing women. That even shapes the way that other men are interacting with that story. Right? People immediately, just in seeing that particular perspective centered, begin to lean more into victim blaming narratives, allows that worldview again to remain entrenched, even when they're dealing with that violence. And so it's a large media responsibility too. who and how do we center? How do we talk about these incidents so that we know where the blame is the second thing. The third thing I would say is Dr. Amos Wilson talks about this, is these conversations and these strategies not to be reactive. We have to attend to the healing programs, the paradigms, the political paradigms that can transform these contexts, right? As opposed to merely reacting when we have the most heinous tragedies. And so I want to shout out How Our Lives Link All Together, based in New York, who have a non-traditional healing justice approach, rooted in the work of the Bedford Sisters, who looked at how can we hold community, how can we hold justice for people who've been deeply pained, deeply harmed, and transform the way we do this work in community. Again, because the idea isn't just to help people maintain with this system of patriarchal dominance, it's how to help people gain the political power and the optimal worldview to not continue to add to the death toll of Black women.
What do you say to this argument that we have heard so much that, look, this was just evil? Like, mental health doesn't actually come into play here, that this was just someone who was evil, disgusting, and that's what they intended to do. When does it become a mental health issue? And then who's actually responsible for that in terms of actually trying to deal with that?
And so it's another great question. Like I mentioned previously, I believe in our public conversation, mental health is used to allow these structures, these systems, these set of relations to stay in place. That's how people have seen them used when we talk about just the rate of gun violence in the country. People will shift the dialogue to be about mental health as opposed to structurally shifting our context. So when people hear, oh, this is mental health, what they feel is you're allowing this to maintain, you're allowing this to stay in place. What we have to reveal is there's a deeper nuance, right? When we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about the psychologies and the mindsets that are involved, we're doing so to, again, rearrange these sets of relationships. And people, I think, are responding to a history of not seeing that. I'm reflecting on a dialogue between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin that they had decades and decades ago. And James Baldwin broke down the structures of anti-Blackness, how that shaped the day-to-day lives of Black men. And so when the Black man engaged in domestic violence, it was the structure, it was the anti-Blackness that was harming the women. And Nikki Giovanni simply said, I hear your analysis and that is not acceptable to me. Right. Within your analysis, it cannot be that I have to sustain this type of death and brutality from somebody who claims to love me. And so when we have these conversations about mental health, what people hear is you're asking me to continue to endure this type of violence, this type of precarity, as opposed to coming with, right, the agency and the solution to transform this reality. So that's what I would say, is I think people need to see the difference.
There's a particular shame around domestic violence that, you may not have when it comes to being an addict, for example. People share those stories. They stay off of drugs. They stop. They stop being alcoholics, and then we celebrate that. I've been sober for X amount of years. Domestic violence is a specific type of shame that is very different than anything that I've seen. People do not want to talk about it. It is such a secret. I'm wondering what your take on why that is.
A lot of times people don't want to believe it. I think that's a lot of people's experience because of the type of shame, the type of relations, the power dynamics that people might want to protect, the image of people they have in their mind. To hold that this person that I deeply trust, this person that I deeply care about, is also capable and engages in a just horrendous form of violence, often routinely, is very, very difficult for not just individuals, for family systems to sit with, for communities to sit with. Right? And so when people think about that, when people come forward, it's people's routine experience that they're not believed because people want to, right, retain any semblance of balance and harmony within a family dynamic. And so having these forms of conversations, again, centering people who've been harmed in these conversations, right? Showing that sometimes you need to, right, rip the wound open, allow it to bleed and sit in that pain. Otherwise, the cycle will continue, right? It requires sometimes to move forward.
And that is a pain that certainly a lot of people do not want to face. I want to bring in the panel. We have Dr. Omekongo Dibinga Sr. He's the author and lecturer in the School of International Service at American University. Thelma Anderson, the creator of the Public Opinion Court and author of Shut Up and Prosecute. And Nicole Robinson, she's a political law attorney and strategist. I want to start with you first, Nicole. A question for the doctor.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us and trying to help us reconcile all these tragedies that we've been hearing about. As you both mentioned, we keep hearing about these instances of femicide and domestic violence, and we know that the majority of female homicides occur within the home or at the hands of men, which as a Black woman, this is particularly troubling because it can start to feel like the men that are supposed to protect me are the ones that might perpetuate harm against me. So can you talk a little bit about at what point does a mental health struggle cross into a level of danger? And how do we get better at recognizing that point so that women and children aren't continuing to suffer?
And there are a range of tools that have been developed. I want to name one of my colleagues, Tritra Raghavan, has developed a lot of frameworks for domestic violence that help name the often invisible, insidious ways that it happens, right? Often it's not a one single incident, right? A lot of the ways people try to measure this is like in how many hits. It's often in the gaslighting, it's often in the isolation, it's often in the separation, right? That slowly begins to take root in a very dangerous way. And so being open and honest, like having those conversations with the people that you care about, the people that you're close to, right? Seeing those pieces so that that dynamic can't even take hold. Because that's the piece in these very brutal incidents that we're talking about. We're talking about dynamics that have existed oftentimes for years before that final critical incident happened, if this makes sense. So it happens through, as we were talking about, the centering of women's perspectives, the open and honest dialogue consistently about safety, of trust, to see how and whether this relationship is still one of safety and what type of protection is needed. So if somebody's talking on my end, I can't.
Doctor, one of the questions that I have is that how do you differentiate between the mental health, the mental illness issues that you're really talking about that are real, and the other side of it, that we are a fundamentally violent society, and we have made it acceptable in so many areas to express ourselves through violence? Does that make us all, and I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way, does it make us all like mentally ill on some levels, that we accept certain levels of violence? They're expected. The fact that we just expect this as an act, as a normal response. I'm kind of balancing between that because I read these stories, no one ever really snaps. People are just talking about, this is how we do things, from video games to movies to what the music's talking about. Can you help us understand that better? The fact that people just may be violent, but are all people who are violent, is it all mental illness? I just need some clarity.
It's a great question. And so the answer, sharply, is no. Again, a lot of the times our conversations around mental illness are designed intentionally to allow these sets of relations that you just discussed, right? How violent we are as a society, right? A society that has more guns than people, that produces firearms that go on to arm conflicts all around the world, right? That is the society that we exist in, one that is full of profound, self-reported despair. that we then normalize, which is why I would return to that idea of the suboptimal versus optimal mindset, right? We have a lot of people who are gripped by these ideas of dominance, materialism. It has shaped their day-to-day expectations. Now, when distress interacts with that person's body, interacts with that person's suboptimal worldview, it might look like a range of different signs and symptoms, but I think sometimes we try to completely categorize violence alongside a particular clinical diagnosis because it would make us feel more safe. It would make us feel more safe to know that, oh, only the person who has this particular diagnosis, that's what's going to lead to the violence. And that's just not the reality. So I think the deeper point is exactly what you're naming. Right? We're existing in a particular context of supreme violence, right? A global context of immense patriarchal violence, such that when people feel distress, that is how they seek to cope with it. The only piece I want to anchor that also in is we also have distinct other concepts. Martin Luther King brought forth the concept of creative maladjustment. The idea that, no, I'm supposed to be maladjusted to a society that is rooted in all these values. It is supposed to feel bad. I'm supposed to be frustrated when I watch Black women die. Right? That is supposed to feel bad. And a society that would tell me I have to normalize this, that is the thing that is fundamentally broken. So that's what I would say. I think moving away from these frameworks of mental health that seek to normalize or distance ourselves from the type of communal responsibilities that we have to one another.
All right, Thelma.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. And I appreciate the conversation right now, especially as a former prosecutor, especially in the domestic violence division. One of the things that I saw, and it would shock people, that I had an equal caseload of both men and women being subjected to being charged with domestic violence cases. And the one thing that I always saw in a female's case versus a male is the male would never hit back and was taught not to hit back and taught not to be the aggressor, which is totally different from the aspect of how the woman would approach it. But in society, it's shown that men are diminished and held at a higher standard opposed to the woman who does practically the same thing. They're just gender-based. So from your perspective, why is it such a difference in how women are treated when they commit domestic violence? Because it's still the same. The man has to deal with the fact that he has now been reduced to being a victim, something that men do not like to be called, is a victim, which is why they shy away from even pursuing justice on their end, to where when it's a man, it's automatic. They're the worst thing in the world. They need to be put away forever. They don't need to get a second chance. And unfortunately, I saw it a lot, but I like to err on the side of fixing and not hurting. So from your perspective, because we have to have these conversations in order for men to feel comfortable, to be vulnerable, to seek help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful question. Again, I want to anchor it in. I think there's a dynamic that often happens online in the public sphere where these conversations are put in tension with one another, when what we're talking about is how do we more fully hold the people that are in our community. To your point, there's a lot of different forms of violence that are invisible, right? So the types of violence that Black men experience in relationships often gets invisibilized. The type of violence that exists in same-sex, same-gender relationships is often invisibilized, right? We don't always have the tools, the narratives, the frameworks to advocate for people in the same way. And so because of this, right, people hide away, and it allows that violence to maintain. I think reverting back to what I had said previously, it's about not being reactive in our conversation. right? Not waiting until the national news cycle that runs through the country and traumatizes millions of people to have these conversations about how we hold these stories up. Right now, in this particular context, right, we're talking about Black women because these are the people who have recently been killed in our cycle. These are the people that we're trying to hold up and emphasize. I want to name very quickly, I apologize for the delay on this, right? Also Nancy Mateer, right, who is somebody who was very large in the Haitian community who was also killed. So that, I think, is guiding a lot of the focus on Black women. To this point, this is going to be, I hope for a lot of people, the beginning of an intentional, sustained dialogue about how we recognize and hold all these forms of violence and how they show up. So that's what I would say to this piece. I think a lot of people have their violence invisibilized. The fact that I don't want to say it takes this because people have these conversations in other places, but it takes these national cases of Black women dying for us to even have this conversation about Black men experiencing violence, right? So how can we more consistently and in a sustained way have these dialogues to transform our communities?
So my final question for you tonight is this. We know that there are situations where there might be someone who does appear to be depressed, who does appear to have anger problems. When people are adjudicated and they are aggressors and they're causing domestic violence, if they go behind bars, they have to go to anger management courses or courses having to do with, battering other people. Would you say that one can actually sit with a counselor, a psychologist, a resource, and actually overcome the fact that you are at your heart an abuser?
So 100%, right? And I think the reasons for abuse, the reasons for violence are, like we're talking about, like threaded. Often in those interactions, you have counselors, therapists, community circles who are doing this type of psychological work up against, right, decades for that individual, decades of propaganda to the contrary, decades of propaganda that says, no, you own this person. Your sense of self-worth is determined by your ownership and control of this person. But in my work, I've witnessed it, right? I've seen it. And I do think I want to name this for a lot of people. People need to see it, right? But before people say this is the model that, we can just go and use, right? People want to know that it works. People need evidence of this. And so I think, again, I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist by training. I take that as my responsibility. I'm going to shout out the great people at the Association of Black Psychologists, where we do a lot of community mental health work. We have the Salbona Healing Circles where people want to come and heal in community. That's on us to demonstrate this consistently for communities before I expect anybody to come and say, oh, yeah, of course, just put them in that program, because a lot of people have seen the opposite, where somebody goes to a program, says all the right things, and goes out and does the harm. So while I've seen it, I think we need to continue to demonstrate it so that people can rely on that as a form of safety and justice.
You have connected a lot of dots, because really, like, so many questions that have been out there is, how does all of this make sense? How is all of this, not just pure evil? But what you have explained to us is that there is a way for people to get help. And ultimately, when we give people help, when we learn how to give people resources and direct them to the right people like you, then something like this can be prevented. And I think that's the goal. That's going to be the goal this week. We're going to be talking about it every night this week. And I want to thank you so much for filling in a lot of gaps that people have had and will continue to have. Thank you for being with us tonight, Doctor.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, still to come, we will be speaking with a woman whose father committed suicide when she was a toddler, as well as a psychologist who specializes in treating children who have experienced such traumas. But first, after the break, we'll discuss how the Trump administration is gradually defunding HBCUs. This is Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network, and we'll be right back.
Why does it feel like we're going backward? Voting rights under attack, schools stripped of funding, Black history erased. This is the Trump MAGA agenda. They want to take us back. They are redrawing congressional lines in states across the country, deciding who gets power and who gets silenced. We see what this is, a power grab. Virginians won't be fooled. Show up, vote, take back our power. It's a temporary measure that gives the people, not politicians, the final say. Vote yes by April 21st.
This is Bill Duke, and you're watching the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, in September 2025, the Trump administration highlighted its redirection of nearly $500 million in federal funding towards historically Black colleges and tribal colleges. This one-time investment was primarily funded by cuts to other colleges that serve large populations of minority students. About 7 months later, Trump's budget proposal for fiscal year 2027 called for a $1.5 trillion increase in defense spending, which would significantly reduce funding for HBCUs. Journalist Michael Harriot wrote the article, How the Trump Administration is Quietly Defunding HBCUs. He joins us now to explain how Trump is overseeing the biggest economic attack on historically Black colleges and institutions in U.S. history. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, these are headlines. They have been plaguing us. I mean, $435 million redirected to HBCUs. Trump signed the Future Act, which permanently extended $255 million in annual funding for HBCUs. What is really going on behind the scenes here that these headlines are not telling us?
So it's a lot of things going on, right? So what Trump really takes credit for is one piece of legislation called the Future Act, which was written by a Black woman. It was passed by Congress, and notably, right, only 2 Republican legislators voted for it. But since he signed it, he takes credit for it for essentially saving HBCUs, is what he said, right? But again, no Republicans voted for it. It was an extension of a law that was already on the books. It made it permanent. And he didn't really have anything to do with it. So that's what most of his bragging has been about. But he also brags about the increase in funding for HBCUs. You know, every president can kind of say, like, I have a record increase in funding, blah, blah, blah. Because, like, every budget increases with the cost of living. And we know congressional spending usually increases unless they cut that line item altogether. So that's what Trump has been mostly bragging about. But what we looked at is not that funding, not those congressional appropriations, right? Because that's not really where HBCUs or most colleges get their funds, right? But this attack on DEI, right? The number of grants that have been cut, the number of federal funding programs that have been cut. We looked at that because a lot of that is where colleges and HBCUs get a lot of funding, and not just for like paying teachers and stuff like that. Like, for instance, at Morehouse, right? They maintain Martin Luther King's papers. They get federal funds from the Department of Interior and the U.S. Parks to maintain that. Not anymore. Trump cut that because DOJ said it was DEI. And so we looked at all of these federal agencies and the grants that they were cutting, and we found that half of all HBCUs have experienced a significant cut by the Trump administration, right? It's not just disproportionately to HBCUs. A majority of the funding has been cut to HBCUs, and that's what we wanted to look at.
And so what does that mean in terms of the viability of HBCUs this particular amount of money that seems to be earmarked, but as you said, when you really looked at it, the numbers don't add up. What could that do to our universities and colleges across the country?
Well, it's as I talk to college presidents, college administrators, and they're gutting them, right? So when you see these attacks on places like Harvard and Yale, like one college administrator told me, a college HBCU president, he said, well, you know, when you talk about the cuts, the attack on Harvard, well, their endowment is large enough that they can replace those funds because Trump will only be in office for a couple of years. But HBCUs, their students and their parents and their stakeholders can't do that, right? They don't have the same kinds of endowments. So so the reality is, right, there are specific areas that, you know, that Trump is attacking. For instance, right, when you attack DEI, he's attacking private corporations. And we talked about in the article about his pressurizing on AT&T to cut all of their funding. They had a specific program that gave scholarships, $10,000 scholarships to students who attended HBCUs. And Trump pressured them to stop those scholarships before he would grant them a license to expand their cellular network, right? So it doesn't show up in that congressional budget, right? But his efforts are defunding HBCUs by stopping students from going there, by defunding the programs like, you know, at Spelman, there's a program for Black women in science that has been defunded, right? Meharry was studying the impact of lung cancer on Black men. That's been defunded. So in many ways, it's so many ways that it's hard to categorize them all, but in every way, except for that little congressional allocation, he's been cutting the funds to HBCUs.
So why haven't we heard from leadership, or has leadership from HBCUs been talking and it's been buried, you know, in the algorithm, or are they afraid to say anything about it? What is your take on that?
I think it's a little of both of those things. I don't know if it's necessarily fear, but we know this administration is very vengeful, right? And it attacks people who speak out on it, right? So I think college presidents are kind of balancing, like, when do I speak out and how do I speak out and not put the students here in jeopardy, right? And we've seen that in many ways, right? The cuts to, for instance, I was scheduled to speak at a historically Black college, and on the morning that I was on my way to campus, and they said, well, you can't come because we're afraid that people would find out that our students have been supplied your book to read. And, you know, the press is here. And so what do, right? They have already learned that information. So you've kind of given your students what they want and what they need. But do you want to, you know, just defy the Trump administration's made up definition of DEI and the target of the Trump administration? I think that's what they're balancing.
So what do you think this narrative, I mean, we can guess in terms of, you know, the votes make it look like there's support for HBCUs that translates into vote. Is that the narrative and the benefit that these particular headlines are intended to put out there for? What's the reason for the traction too? Because they seem to have been picked up in terms of the coverage very, very well.
I think it's because it's a couple of things, right? So one, the Trump administration, you know how, I mean, let's be honest, like how white people are. I did this for Black people, so I can't be racist, right? Like it's the congressional or the political definition of, like, you know, one of my best friends is Black. One of my best colleges is funded by Congress, right? So that's one area of it, right? It gives them cover for all of the racist stuff that they're doing behind the scenes, right? And the other thing is, I mean, let's be honest, right? We know journalists aren't really digging into congressional budgets and grant terminations. And so these things kind of don't make headlines because it's not interesting. It's not going to be on the front page if it does make headlines. So that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is that right? He knows, right? If I give you $5 and still $10, and everybody's talking about the $5 I gave you, I could still leave it more, right? So he's taking away these things through DOGE, through these terminations of grants through HHS, the Department of the Interior, even, the Department of Defense. And he's doing that quietly because, when he's issued these edicts, they don't release a press release. And so nobody really knows unless you know where to look. And I think journalists aren't looking because mainstream media, by and large, don't care about HBCUs. So we see the headlines about Harvard and MIT, but we don't see the ones about the HBCUs because, the people who make these things public don't care either.
Yeah. Listen, we got to read beyond the headlines. I want to thank you so much for giving us insight. I want folks to also go and read the article at, contrabandcamp.com, correct?
Contrabandcamp.com.
All right, Michael Harrod, thank you so much for being with us this evening. As always, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, treating children with devastating traumas and how it impacts their development. But after the break, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Congresswoman Summer Lee clashed over Black maternal health and DEI during a tense hearing after Lee pressed him on disparities affecting Black women. You don't want to miss that. Now, your support is critical to what we do. You can support us via Cash App using your Stripe code at the bottom left-hand corner. You can also help us with credit cards. Use the same thing. PayPal's R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo's RM Unfiltered, Zelle at RolandsMartin.com, Rolling and RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And if you're old school, you can send a check. That's okay. You can also send money orders payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered, P.O. Box 57196. That's Washington, D.C., 20037. Stay with us. There is more to come on Roland Martin Unfiltered. If you want some of that swag, head to shopblackstarnetwork.com. A lot of good stuff on there. You're going to find official Black Star Network swag and all kinds of Black-owned products, including mine, Girl Prep. Buy on shopblackstarnetwork.com. It's a way to support the network and support Black businesses. We'll be right back after the break. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, only on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
MAGA Republicans ended diversity programs, cut funding for Black students, and fired federal employees. And they won't stop there. Now, they've redrawn congressional maps so that they can rig the November elections. But we have the power to stop them. By voting yes for fair elections, we have the final say on who represents us in Congress. This is a temporary measure to restore fairness. They are not backing down, and neither can we. Make a plan to vote by April 21st and vote yes for fair elections.
Hi, I'm Swing Cash, Basketball Hall of Famer, and you're watching Black Star Network.
All right, Pennsylvania Congresswoman Summer Lee confronted Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. during a recent House Committee on Education and Workforce hearing. She pressed him on the Trump administration's attacks on Black maternal health research, community-based maternal health programs, and initiatives focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. She even proved his remarks about reparenting Black children. Take a listen.
So this is Black Maternal Health Week, so I'll just start there. Secretary Kennedy, I'm sure you're aware that Black women are at least 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. The vast majority of those deaths are preventable. Black women in my district are more likely to die during pregnancy than their peers in 97% of U.S. cities. Your written testimony mentions maternal and child health 4 times, but from what I've seen, the NIH canceled grants researching Black maternal health. Your administration's fiscal year 27 budget proposes eliminating Healthy Start, which is one of the federal government's primary community-based maternal health programs. And you've made it a priority of HHS to end diversity, equity, and inclusion. So yes or no, my question for you is, if a medical school or a public health school educates students about addressing the Black maternal mortality crisis, would you consider that an illegal DEI?
No.
No, you would not?
No.
Great. I do hope for the medical schools, the universities, and the accreditors, your administration has been threatening that they're watching this and take this directive to continue teaching about and addressing the Black maternal mortality crisis. And I expect your agency to restore and expand funding and support for that work. Also, yes or no, do you think consuming more protein and avoiding Tylenol will prevent Black women from dying 3 times more likely during a pregnancy?
I doubt it. Tylenol doesn't kill you.
So then why aren't you putting forth serious policies that actually address the health crises in this country instead of just these unserious conspiracy theories and this wellness influencer mess that we...
Do you want me to answer that question, or are you just talking?
No, it's a question.
We are doing more on maternal health than any other administration.
No, I said Black maternal health.
On maternal health.
Black maternal health.
That includes Blacks and whites.
But the thing is that they're actually not the same outcomes, which means that we need specific and intentional interventions for Black maternal health and Black infant.
Can I finish? I'm saying.
Are you going to answer that?
Yeah, we have right now, we've implemented a perinatal pilot project that we're in 220 hospitals around the country. And we have reduced maternal health mortalities by 42% at those hospitals by providing them protocols.
Can you please share what the reduction has been for Black maternal health?
Across the board, it's 42%.
But Black maternal health still has worse outcomes than other people.
I wouldn't know. It helps everybody.
But it isn't.
Object to that?
Okay, thank you. It is not. I do want to just, for the record, state that it does not help everyone. Your agency told programs to remove a list of nearly 200 words and phrases from their funding applications, including the word Black. Do you have an idea of how we could solve the Black maternal mortality crisis if we can't say Black?
President Trump is trying to end division in this country, not so
division. Not eviction.
During the last 4 years. That's what DEI did. It divided people. It polarized people.
No. We're not talking about eviction. We're talking about healthcare.
I'm calling about DEI.
We're talking about healthcare.
Yeah.
Disparities. So what we're asking is if you attack DE&I and then we have a crisis that impacts one population over another, but you cannot direct specific spending or research or interventions to that population, how do you solve the problem?
Do you think the federal government should be paying for DEI?
I think the federal government has a vested interest in ensuring that its citizens survive childbirth.
Well, we are meeting that obligation.
We are not.
Oh, that I can explain to you how we are.
You have not done so far. But also, I would say that we can improve healthcare for everybody at the same time as helping the people who are most likely to die. That's what DE&I. Well, first of all, DE&I makes sure that we have Black doctors or women doctors, or that we're talking about the fact that we have a mortality rate that is not matched by any other country as what we would call developed as ours. Really quickly, in yesterday's Ways and Means Committee hearing, you denied saying that every Black kid is now just a standard put on Adderall, SSRIs, benzos, which are known to induce violence, and those kids are going to have a chance to go somewhere else and get reparented. Why did you deny saying this?
Why did I deny payment?
No, why did you deny that you said that every Black kid is now just standard put on Adderall, SSRIs, benzos, which are known as to induce violence, and that you would rehome them?
Well, it's largely true that Black kids, because it's easier to handle people, and a lot of the public.
And you're going to rehome them?
No, I never said that we should rehome them for illegal drugs. Oh. Psychiatric.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Okay, I just wanted to know if that was him, for the record. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady.
I yield back.
Dr. Dibinga, a little confusion there, right? I mean, first it seemed like he was acknowledging he said it. Then he said, you know what, I didn't say it. He's got a whole problem on his hands. I mean, the fact that he's not even trying to say something specific to, Black specifically, it tells us exactly where he is in terms of understanding what's going on in this world when it comes to maternal health care?
Well, it really symbolizes what we've been dealing with as it relates to this entire administration. Let's go back to 2022 with Senator Bill Cassidy out of Louisiana. Remember what he said? He said, if you actually exclude Black women, our mortality rates aren't that bad. Right. And so they have a policy, a mindset of excluding Black women. This is a president who apparently didn't want to stand next to a Black woman as it relates to giving her next military commendation. And so what you see with Kennedy there, and what I also appreciate about Representative Lee, is that she put him on the spot with his own words. And she really exposed how ignorant and ridiculous this anti-DEI argument is, as he's sitting there claiming, well, it takes care of everybody. It takes care of everybody. When you look at the mortality rates, look at the stories of people like Serena Williams, who, survived her pregnancy scare. And if Black people, and especially Black women, are not there in these spaces to center the stories of Black women as it relates to stories like mortality rates, we're going to keep getting nonsensical statements about we're taking care of everybody. We're doing this for everybody. We don't need DEI. We're taking care of it. So to have her voice there, it was very monumental. And I hope that she continue. Well, I don't have to hope. I know she's going to do that. But I hope other Black representatives continue to call all of these individuals out as it relates to their anti-DEI policies that are killing our communities.
Yeah, Thelma, we have to continue telling the story, like Dr. Dubinga said. Otherwise, it just doesn't get called. And that's why voting is so important, so that you could have someone like a Representative Lee really tell the story and call him out on something that we know he tried to deny just a few days ago. So it's important to be a part and be on the floor to help tell the real story.
Absolutely. What Representative Lee did was took him through there, and he could not accept that his receipts didn't match his memory. Because what we know about the Republican Party is the fact that they like to say it, but they don't like to be reminded of it. And when we're looking at the mortality rate, we just had 2 big incidents in the state of Florida alone, where Black women in the middle of labor wanting to elect their own treatment and avoid a C-section. And we know what C-sections have done to Black women. Put them in a hearing with no legal representation and forced a judge to demand and order that Black women have a C-section against their request. So when we're talking about DEI and we have a crackhead that is trying to tell us that everybody is the same, when we having these issues in states where Black women are denied their right to choose their service and not have even a legal representative there to protect them. And then we have the young lady in Georgia who was forced to stay on life support because the Republicans wanted this abortion ban so that we can equalize the population growth, because their population is declining and minorities are taking over the majority, because we can't help that they don't want to sleep with each other. That's not our problem. But also, don't come over here telling us what and how our uterus can be managed.
Nicole, what do you make of the exchange?
He definitely tried to all lives matter the situation, but I'm so glad that Rep. Lee did not let him get away with that mess. And this administration wants us to believe that acknowledging race in healthcare policy is divisive. But we know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is supposed to level the playing field. And here's the thing, the federal government did not hesitate to create the conditions that led to this crisis. But now it feels so uncomfortable talking about Black women's issues and issues that specific demographics face. And as Rep. Lee said, helping Black women survive childbirth does not come at the expense of anyone else. We can have policies that are directly targeting and supporting Black women, and policies that are supporting everyone. So any argument that he tried to make was nonsensical, and we couldn't even hear what he was saying anyway.
Right. All right. Thank you for that final point on this. We're going to go to a short break, so stay with us right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered, right here on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
Why does it feel like we're going backward? Voting rights under attack, schools stripped of funding, Black history erased. This is the Trump MAGA agenda. They want to take us back. They are redrawing congressional lines in states across the country, deciding who gets power and who gets silenced. We see what this is, a power grab. Virginians won't be fooled. Show up, vote, take back our power. It's a temporary measure that gives the people, not politicians, the final say. Vote yes by April 21st.
What's up? It's Talib Kweli. I'm CEO. This is the Black Star Network.
According to the World Health Organization, more than 720,000 people die by suicide each year, and it remains the third leading cause of death for 15 to 29-year-olds. So many children are left to grieve the loss of a parent to suicide, a painful experience that often leads to mental health struggles such as depression, anxiety, and even thoughts of suicide themselves. Texas Representative Jolanda Jones has been vocal about her father's suicide and how it impacted her life, and she joins us now, along with psychologist Dr. Aldwan Tart, who can walk us through the healing process of a child who has experienced this trauma. I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. Representative, I wanted to start with you, certainly, because I wanted you to shed a little bit of light on your story. Can you take us to that time in your life, how old you were when it happened, and kind of how your world changed after that when you were growing up?
So my parents were married. My dad went away to Vietnam, didn't come back the same. He went from being a strong person that everybody listened to and respected to crying all the time. I was young. I was a year, but I was a very bright year. And my father came home crying. Of course, I got this from my mom, but I do remember that my dad killed himself because I used to say, "Daddy, go bang." And in my neighborhood, everybody knew my dad blew his brains out. I was literally in the room with him when he did it. Now, I can tell you the layout of the room, even though the building's no longer there. And growing up as a kid, it was a way some kids bullied me. So kids would be like, Jolanda, every time we passed where my dad killed himself, they'd be like, your daddy's head is under the bed, or go be with your daddy, or you crazy like your dad. I mean, even thinking about it now is triggering me, right? Because it was just very difficult as a kid. And when we moved from that neighborhood, I literally told nobody about what happened with my dad because it was so cruel. But I can tell you that I literally don't sleep through the night. Like, I constantly had dreams that people were chasing my father and I, and they would catch my dad and kill him, and then they'd come to catch me, and I'd wake up gasping, and so I don't sleep soundly, even to this day. I'm 60 years old, I'll be 61. But I have had therapy because in addition to that, I also blame myself for my father's suicide. So I had feelings of self-doubt and self-worth, for the most part, saying, if I was worthy of love, my dad would have never abandoned me like that. He would have never left me like that. And so I had to deal with that, just not thinking I was worthy because my father, he abandoned me in the most brutal way that you can. And so I've had a lot of therapy. Thankfully, I was able to find a Black woman therapist. I wanted that. But so now I can sleep through the night, actually. But I still don't sleep soundly. It's just a lot. It's just a lot.
Yeah. Thank you again for just sharing these intimate details. You have so much to teach people, and we so appreciate you being so honest and bearing your soul. Can you think of a conversation maybe with someone in your family, or perhaps a counselor or psychologist, that changed the tide for you, or that helped you in some way?
Well, and let me also say this. My grandparents, my dad killing himself, I think, started something in my family. So my Uncle Rocky also committed suicide. He went to Vietnam as well, didn't come back the same. He actually talked about his experience, though. Then my Uncle Ricky killed himself, when I was a freshman in college. So if somebody in your family commits suicide, definitely suicide is on your mind. I've tried suicide. The last time I thought about committing suicide was when I was pregnant with my son, because I was in an abusive relationship with my ex-husband. So as far as domestic violence is concerned, that affected me as well. But so I had to learn how not to be suicidal. I had to learn how to be okay with me. And my psychologist helped me understand that my father killing himself didn't have anything to do with me. It wasn't my fault. I mean, I think that was the biggest thing for me, was saying somehow it's my fault. So I worry about Dr. Fairfax's kids, because they're gonna think it's their fault. They're gonna think there was something that they should have been able to do. And it just affects you. It just affects you. And if you grow up in a house where there's violence, I mean, you're more likely to be violent. But I mean, suicide, it doesn't just affect the person that kills himself, it affects everybody.
I want to bring the doctor in on this conversation. Let me ask you this, because, you know, in researching this, I did find a lot of stories that the representative was talking about in terms of kids being made fun of and bullied because someone committed suicide, and them being the center of attacks themselves in a situation that they could not control. What is your advice to people who are dealing with suicide? Even recently with these children shot in Louisiana, you've got classmates and playmates and friends and cousins. They are experiencing all of this. What is your advice for how to deal with a child specifically who is going through this journey?
First of all, thanks for having me on the show. And Jolanda, I just want to just hold space for what happened to you and what is happening, not only to you, but your entire family, grieving from different directions over and over again. We think that grief is just something that happens once and that you get over it, but you grieve 1,000 times over. To answer your question, this is why you have to have systems that understand the impact of violence on children. Think about our veterans come back and get mandatory counseling. Police officers that discharge their weapon and firefighters get counseling. Whenever they're in traumatic situations, we have to treat our children as our most valuable resources. So what Jolanda is saying is that children absolutely, positively have to be in counseling. So in Philadelphia, they had a program. It's called CHOP. Okay, Violence Intervention Program in Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And what they realize is that when police are called out to the house and children are there and they're taking the mother or the father or partner away and no one's intervening with the children, they are leaving those children to survive on their own and deal with trauma on their own. So here's how the system works. So this is not just Philadelphia, it's California, but this should be nationwide. One, you have to immediately get these kids into counseling. They have to have access to counseling, to do what's called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're walking with these kids through their trauma, helping them name it, and like Jolanda said, helping them figure out that it's not their fault. Now, I've done this work for 30 years, right? Worked in safe houses with children, work with children who've been traumatized. And the main thing that you have to do is help them understand why it's not their fault. I know you're saying, what will make them think that it's their fault? But for safety, you have to try to figure out, this is part of grief, and how this happened. Maybe I would have been paying attention. Maybe if I wouldn't have made dad mad, maybe if I would have locked the door, maybe if I would have been home. You see, so the kids begin to start thinking that somehow this is their fault, to grab some sense of control, and you have to walk them through that very extensive trauma. This was 16 to 24 sessions that you're working with children. And we're talking about small children who don't have the verbal ability. You're actually doing something called play therapy or sand therapy, where you're using actual figurines, helping them develop the language or play out what happened, because you'll see a regression. You'll see their symptoms be able to change right after the event. Right? So we have to intercede on a systemic level, not only in the home, but also in their schools, helping their classmates to understand and how to build community around their friends dealing with it, so they're not dealing with bullying, or they're not just sent to school with no support as if nothing happened.
So I have a question.
I
This
want
is
to
for
say
both of
something
you.
really quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
You know how many times people talk about their families and their parents in school? Like, I literally avoided it. My friends have fathers. I don't have a father. People naturally want to know, well, where's your dad? I had to come up with like a gajillion lies once we moved out of my neighborhood, because I was terrified that my classmates, my teammates would know my father killed himself, because people believe stuff about you. They believe you're crazy. I mean, when I tell you it was almost like being in a closet, I was terrified that I'd be outed at my dad, because people's parents don't commit suicide. It is just, I don't know how to explain. Even now, I'm 60 years old. What do you say to somebody? Like, so I miss my father's birthday is June 16th. I'm always sad. On Veterans Day, because my dad was a Marine, I never post happy Veterans Day stuff. For holidays, during Christmas, I'm always sad. For Thanksgiving, because that's when you're supposed to be with your family, you know? And a lot of times when you don't have a parent, like we were poor because my dad didn't have money to contribute to my mother, you know? So then your life, you just have less money as a family. It permeates everything. And how do you talk about it? Oh, by the way, my dad killed himself. I mean, it's just not a normal conversation to have. It's just not. And I said, my dad killed himself a long time ago. And I'm literally having a conversation. And I think for the most part, you never get over it. So I've learned to deal with it. And I'm obviously very successful, you know, despite that. But I try not to stay in that moment, because it will overwhelm me. It just makes you very sad.
Yeah. Representative,
Jolanda brings up
Yes.
Jolanda brings up
Go
a
ahead,
great
Doctor.
point. So part of counseling is actually rehearsing and refining the trauma narrative, right? This is helping kids tell the story about what happened, not only as part of coping and developing the language. So if you can name it, you can tame it. This is how you keep, oftentimes kids come in because they've regressed. So they've become either aggressive or started wetting the bed, or you see behavior changes. You'll see an A student all of a sudden start failing, skipping, drugs, alcohol, all these different ways to cope, right? Just finding different ways. And so you'll see these behaviors actually start to these symptoms go away once you allow them to be able to talk about the trauma. And so you also have to decenter yourself from the trauma that happened to you. See, trauma is not me. Trauma happened to me. So then the story is like, hey, what happened to my father is a very, very sad story. Right? That's why I become a legislator, because I want to advocate for these things. And what happened with my father was that he decided to do these things. But the narrative, which has been played out with the therapist, actually allows the child to be able to not only feel heard, but to be able to say something that gets the response that keeps them from being bullied and not decenter themselves from the actual trauma. They're able to get psychological distance. This is how you can find someone who's actually been through trauma and it seems like they're healing, versus someone that feels like they are still in the trauma to the same degree. That's why it's important to not only to get these, and there's multiple ways to treat trauma, but to get kids counseling, which should be mandatory, should be legislated, but to also be in groups when it comes to grief. I want to give one resource, which is Grief Share, right? Because we can say, I know how you feel, but Jolanda would tell you, no, you don't. Not unless you're dealing with something real time and you have a parent that has done the same thing. So a lot of it is group work. And then for parents who've lost a child, that is a specific type of grief. That's compassionatefriends.org. They have groups across the country that help parents who've lost children to be able to talk about grief in community.
What would you say, doctor, outside of counseling? You know, let's go into the home. What can a caregiver do for a child, which I'm sure it would be different, you know, a 4-year-old versus a 14-year-old, but what are some of the things you do at home in order to deal with the grief and deal with the struggle and the trauma.
Right. Part of the counseling involves the non-offending parent and the support network. They are often in counseling with the children to be able to establish a sense of safety. So when I would do the work, we would have signs up, where kids have what's called like magical thinking, where they put a poster and say no hitting. All right, no one's allowed to hit. Are reestablishing safety. You also want to restore a sense of normalcy for the kids. So if they're involved in sports, if they're involved in dance, if they are involved in other activities, you don't want to stop those things. You want to be able to treat them and engage and talk with them, but allow them to have a sense of normalcy to where their life is not focused only on the trauma. And in the case of Jolanda, there are times in which we've moved kids to different school districts. You can get permission or different schools because going into the school is a trauma. It's kind of like losing a spouse in church, and you have to go to the same church, and everyone asks you, well, where's your father? Where's your mother? Where's your wife? A lot of times kids just need a fresh start in a different school system or a different school to where they can come in and everyone is not talking about what happened with their mother and father. Let's call it administrative transfer. In addition to this, kids being screened is in California. It's things called ACEs, ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences. See, Jolanda has to tell someone what happened. But typically what happens is that you'll have a kid get referred to a clinical psychologist because they're fighting, they're not eating, they're anxious, they're hypervigilant. When you close the door, right, they wet their pants. They don't want to get on the bus. They are hypervigilant around men. Anything that triggers the trauma that they've been in a claustrophobic environment in a classroom where they're looking for the escape. How can they learn if they're trying to figure out, how can I get out of here? So we have to make sure that we are engaging parents, engaging teachers, engaging counselors, engaging systems to be able to center the children so that they're able to get the resources that they need across the nation with the different mental health dollars and
we
insurances.
have a couple of minutes. Representative, I am wondering, I know that these past couple of weeks, and anytime you see a headline that might be triggering, you probably have to go through a process to kind of regroup yourself. How do you do that so that you don't always fall apart? I know sometimes you will, but are there practices that you have in place that have helped you get through when you see a headline like we've been seeing for these past couple of weeks?
So what we've seen for these last couple of weeks, I immediately feel for the kids, right? Immediately, because I know what they're going to go through, right? I know no matter how much people tell them that it's not their fault, they're going to think it's their fault. That's just what kids are going to do. And I know that people talk about their parents all the time. And then you don't have, with the kids, the Fairfax kids, they don't have any parents now. So they need serious counseling. They need to be around loving, supportive people. And they're going, again, I was very emotional before, but I won't say I'm back to myself. But what you have to understand is you're never going to get over it, and you don't want to get over it. You want to remember your parents. You want to remember things like that, but it can't be the only thing in your life. And I have friends that when I'm feeling sad about not having a father during the holidays or whatever, I can call them, right? And they'll figure out a way to distract me. Because it's natural to miss your parents. I mean, even when your parents just sort of naturally die, you miss your parents. So it's just a lifelong struggle. I was thankful that I finally got health insurance, because before I got health insurance, I literally I couldn't afford to talk to anybody, and I would cry all the time. And I can also say that my father's suicide affected my personal relationships. Like, I did not pick well with men because I didn't have a man to teach me things that a living, breathing father probably would have taught me. So there are all these manifestations that are going to happen with the children. And what you don't want is for the world, who we don't know loves them, to teach them how to cope. What we want is people who have degrees and who are experts teaching them the best ways for them to get through it. I don't think there's one way to learn to get through a parent's suicide. I think it's going to be different for everyone. And I think the manifestations will be different for everyone. And you need someone there who can help you get through the manifestations whenever they arise. Because at 60 years old, sometimes mine still arise. Right.
Dr.
So
Tom, before we go to the panel, oh yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying that, wish it wouldn't have happened. I wish my dad would be around. But he's not. And I have to accept that I'm never gonna have him, So he didn't get to meet my son. He didn't get to meet my granddaughter. And I have to be okay with that. But, I also understand that everybody dies. Like, we're all going to die. We just don't know when and we don't know how. So you can be successful. I mean, I'm a self-employed lawyer. I'm a state representative. You saw me during the corn break. I was fighting and actually having to fight through the trauma of my father's suicide actually made me stronger. It really did. Notwithstanding tears, I don't think God gives us tears to necessarily say that they're bad. Sometimes you need to cry and let it out. And I think that's also something important. People need to let you know that it's okay to be sad. You just can't stay in the sadness.
Right. Matter of fact, it's you vulnerability in saying that I'm hurting, I am scared, I feel lonely, I am nervous, I can't sleep is part of mental wellness, right? So if we can't open up about what's actually happening in our minds and bodies, a book called The Body Keeps Score. And that's why with children, you won't necessarily be able to tell with their language. You'll be able to tell by changes in their behavior, bedwetting, all of a sudden being anxious, whereas before they weren't anxious, decline in school, sleep issues, either internalizing or externalizing behaviors that you haven't seen. And that's why the gold standard, and there are many treatment models, but again, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy has great treatment outcomes. Think of the model it's called practice. It's like eight elements really quickly. So one, we have to have psychoeducation, teaching the kids to be able to name and what happened and say it's not their fault. Or relaxation. The nervous system is impacted, right? So their nerves are hypervigilant, right? They're not able to sleep because I was calm one day and then this happened. How can I actually relax? So you actually have to go through a series of helping them to calm their nervous system with breathing, progressive relaxation, grounding techniques, and then effective modulation. Teach the kids how to actually talk about with their feelings and what happened. This is an actual education for kids. And then cognitive coping, helping them work through the thoughts that are keeping the children stuck. Like going outside means I'm going to get hurt, right? And then that leads to like in vivo, it's called in vivo trauma remind. It's basically where you put the kids back in the same environment where they were traumatized, like back outside, and say it's okay to play now. What happened then is not going to happen now, but that is progressive. Can you imagine the kids don't automatically want to do that? Right. And then we already talked about the trauma narrative, right? That's the T. So the trauma narrative, and then the in vivo mastery, and then the conjoint parent-child sessions, and then finally enhancing safety, for their future development. So that's an 8 practice. That's a whole. That's why it takes 16 to 24 sessions to be able to do this. Is not 1 to 2, 3 sessions to be able to walk children through this so that they can actually. We're talking about children, but same thing with adults, to be able to recover. So I want you to understand, because I know in the Black community, we don't really understand what counseling does. We think that it means that something's wrong with us. No. This is treatment for your nervous system, for your mind, for your body, to be able to help you to re-regulate and to be able to heal.
Yeah. Quickly,
and I can tell you that I wrote a book. It's called Owning My Shit. Stands for Suffering, Hardship, Internalizing Trauma. One of the chapters in this book is called Daddy Go Bang, because after my father killed himself, you see, I talk about suicide right here. So after my daddy killed himself, and I write about how it affected me, the negative consequences that I displayed because of my father's suicide. But then I talked about how I was able to get, through it. And I can tell you that the reason that I'm successful today and not crazy as hell is because I got therapy. And I can tell you that there are other people in my family that my mother experienced trauma, right? Her husband blew his brains out. She was in the apartment. My mother, on the one hand, she probably didn't want me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. My mother doesn't want to do therapy because my mother thinks you're crazy if you go to therapy. I think you're crazy if you don't go to therapy, right?
And a lot of people, let me jump in because we want to get the panel in. A lot of people would agree with your mom, unfortunately. Let me turn this over to first Nicole. I know she's got questions for this amazing conversation. Nicole.
Yes, thank you both for sharing all of these incredible resources and also for sharing your story. You have me over here fighting back tears. I'm like, Nicole, you got to get it together so you can ask these questions. So you both talked about how children need really strong support networks to recover. But we also know that a lot of children don't have those networks, and maybe the families that are supposed to be supporting them are also grieving after the death of a parent or a loved one. So can you talk about how to support those children who don't have those strong networks and what families can do while they're grieving to also support children?
I mean, the first thing I just want to respond to both of you, and this is our resiliency. I'm trying to fight back tears and trying to get it together. No, grief is being vulnerable and saying this hurts. See, when we suppress it and we suck it up, and then we suck it up with a bigger straw, yeah, we're able to function, but we're not healing. Right? Because we're not really addressing what is happening with our bodies, our minds, and saying, hey, no, I am in mourning. I am in grief. I am traumatized. So we understand this with war veterans. When they come back from the war, we understand, okay, they have post-traumatic stress disorder. But when we see mom and dad fight, we see neighborhood violence. I used to work in Inglewood, California, and there's gang violence. Three people hurt. Everyone watched that in the neighborhood. We just go back into our house like nothing happened, right? No, it is a community response to be able to help those kids to get the help that they need. So 988. All right. You can dial 988. It's the National Mental Health Hotline, and saying, hey, I need to get my kids and myself help so that I can be able to talk about this. So when we start talking about people of color, they just don't know what therapy is. We have this idea that people are in psychiatric wards, or someone is putting everyone on medication, giving you these side effects. They don't know anything about trauma-informed treatment. And so with kids, it is, and schools know this. If you bring on school counselors, they deal with this, unfortunately, every day, especially in high stress, high risk areas where they're getting the kids these resources. But this is why we have to have mental health parity. This is why everyone has has to have access to mental health care, but high quality mental health care. And why we have to train more professionals who look like us to be able to connect with kids and their families to speak the same language. Less than 4% of all psychologists nationwide are Black. And then you start talking about men, it's probably less than 1%. So we have to do something nationwide to be able to train more clinicians, more people of color. And then in this training, lay personnel, pastors, teachers, healers, how to be able to help children so that they have a safe space to be able to talk about how they feel and get the help that they deserve, as well as their families, even if especially when their families are dealing with their own stress. Everyone needs to be in counseling.
I think that they especially need to better train counselors in schools. I can tell you, I had issues in schools because of what I was dealing with at home. You know, my mom had trauma, and of course, she was taking it out on me. I was the only child of my father. My mother was very angry at my father, and I was the only thing left of him. And so I just had issues related to that. And the entire time I was in school, I never told anybody that my dad committed suicide, even though it permeated every aspect of my life. And so I think that you need more school counselors who can talk to us to make us feel comfortable enough to share what's really going on, because we get distracted in school. We really do. I think that's one thing that can happen. I also believe that there needs to be more training about Black mental health and that of children in the medical schools. I have a sister that's a physician, and she told me that they're racist against Black people in medical school in the way that they train doctors. And I can tell you that I did not find someone that understood my cultural background and the color of my skin until I found a Black woman. And so, and when we were trying to find this for people in my family who are men, I absolutely agree with what he said. It was so hard to find a Black therapist, a Black male therapist. There just aren't a lot. And people aren't going to tell you their deepest fears, their deepest trauma if they don't trust you. I'm going to tell you, we're going to keep it to ourselves. And that's why I talk about owning my shit, suffering hardship, internalizing trauma, because I believe that once I figured out how not to keep my trauma buried inside of me and to talk about it in a healthy way with someone who could help, my life turned around. And I ended up using that trauma. You know, it was my kryptonite. It ended up being my superpower.
Dr.
And that's
Dominga,
what
do you
my
have a
book
question?
talks about. Yeah.
Do you have a question for either the representative or the doctor, Dr. Dominga?
Representative Jones, thank you so much for sharing your powerful story. We've heard bits and pieces over it, watching over the years, but on our show here. But I really appreciate all of your honesty and passion. I want to connect your story to your work in the policy space. Given what's as a policymaker, given what's happening in our country now with all of the cuts to mental health issues and the like under this administration, what do you see on the horizon, or what do you see what's happening right now? I'm seeing the stories about farmers, committing suicide because of the tariffs. Like, it seems like it's going to get worse as it relates to the suicide epidemic before it gets better.
So, a lot of people are now talking about suicide, but I've literally talked about suicide my entire life, right? So I'm not surprised, veterans committing suicide. And I see all these young people who literally they don't have the tools to deal with these things. And so as a state representative, I do all I can. Now, you got to understand, I'm in Texas with a bunch of anti-Black state Republicans in an overwhelmingly Republican legislature. But every opportunity I have to expand Medicaid in Texas, I do. Because if you're sick mentally or you're sick physically, your life is going to be more difficult. And you know this, if you're a sick adult, you can't work as much. You can't be as productive. If you're a sick child, you're missing school, you're not learning as much. And so if there's something that that's access to healthcare, so I sit on the Public Health Committee, and I'm always fighting to provide access to healthcare, again, mental and physical, for everyone, especially Black people. And as a state representative, again, I'm in Texas, I'm always trying to get them to look at disparity rates, because Black people in everything, including healthcare, we're at the bottom of the bucket. Every now and then there'll be someone Native American who's below us, or Hispanic, but for the majority of the time, it's us. And so that's why it's very important to me to sit on public health, so that I can share my story, so that I can advocate, so that I can use my legal skills to kill bad legislation, or use my trial skills to apply pressure points to try to expand healthcare for everyone. And that's what I do. So definitely in the houses of Congress and the houses of the state legislatures, we need to do that. We need to provide more health care. And what I don't understand, but I do understand this.
Who do I go to after?
My son, I lived in Spain. My son was born in Spain. My health care was free. My Lamaze classes, my prenatal, my postnatal, they weren't trying to push me out of the hospital, and I had to pay not one dime. And I'm going to fight in these United States of America and in Texas until we have what Spain has.
All right, one last question. We have Thelma.
Good evening, Doctor. I wanted to touch on the reinforcement side of therapy because me and my family, we have the unique,
what did you say?
The reinforcement side of therapy. And because my family have the unique circumstance of having our nieces who are twins and losing both of their parents, and understanding, one, they lost their mother before they turned 2. And then they turned around and lost their father to the criminal justice system at 5 years old, and having to witness the system taking their father for the choices that he made. And the one thing, because I was in therapy, because losing their mom caused me to have suicidal thoughts, we knew early on that we had to get them in therapy, because they lost both parents by the age of 5. That we saw signs of anger, resentment, missing their parents, kids telling them that they have no parent, and having hard time sleeping, talking, and telling us their emotions. The importance that we saw within the first 3 months helped save and foster a environment that reinforced safety, reinforced development, and allowed them to flourish to where they are now. But because this is a lifelong sentence for them, what does reinforcement look like when they have that entry therapy, but we know that this is a lifelong sentence that they have to endure without having both parents? We can be the best aunties and uncles that we know that we're going to be, but we cannot bring back their parent. And being that they're growing up, how do we continue, and how often should we continue therapy when children have lost both of their parents?
Right.
And for this question, I want to end on Dr. Tart. Thank you.
All right. So one, like what we're saying is that we haven't seen kids get well from trauma, but therapists have. This is a think about FDA approved drugs, right? This is something that's been clinically proven to work. When you start getting kids cognitive behavioral therapy, that's trauma informed. That's just only one of the interventions. You know, therapists have a toolkit. So this is something that kids can cope and recover from. Now, you're never the same, but it is not a life sentence to then be suicidal, to then be homicidal. But because it's an ACE, an adverse childhood experience, right? You have to get treatment for it because we're watching this and we're allowing kids to cope with this on their own. So California, if we're talking about legislation really quickly, made it a law to screen every single child for an adverse childhood experience at their pediatric visits, right? Because every kid has to go to the doctor. All right, they train pediatricians on how to screen for this so that they're actually can go to the primary care physician and be able to be connected to a social worker, psychologist, a counselor. Philadelphia built a hospital-based violence intervention program, right? These are not radical ideas. We know what works in certain states. We just need other states, and we need advocates who have a heart for this, all right, who are watching this right now to be able to push for this. Well, how can California do it? Well, how can we get Georgia to do that? How can we get other states, Alabama, to do that? How can we get Louisiana to be able to do that? If Philadelphia can build this hospital, why can't we? So those are two things that we can do right now. And again, more programming like this. And I can tell you what psychologists are doing. All right, we realize that we cannot help everyone. So we're now going full speed, not only with private practice, but psychoeducation, where we're actually teaching people how to heal from trauma, what you need to look out for. Because the more people know, then they say, hey, that's my body. I thought I just couldn't sleep because I had a bunch of nervous energy, or I thought that I just was had a temper problem. No, you had untreated PTSD. And when more people know, then they can get into therapy and then tell their family about it. They can see a change in their children, and then we can get more people healed.
Representative Jones and Dr. Tart, I want to thank you so much, especially you, Representative Jones, for sharing so much of your personal story. It was very helpful and just a great way for everybody to connect the dots on what to do when this happened. Thank you so much to both of you for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Prayers with you.
Absolutely. All right. So why are we shedding light on these topics? Well, these are much needed discussions that we have to have in our community. We here at the Roland Martin Unfiltered show, we're not afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations that could actually save lives. And that's why we're really doing this. Here are just a couple of viewer responses about our conversations about mental health. The first one is from Dr. Denise Baker Anegbenigamo. She wrote, I just finished watching your YouTube videos about mental health and domestic violence. Bravo. Thank you, Roland, for your courage to speak the truth to our people. We have to address this issue now. Truth be told, we are behind, and our Black men are now waving the vibrant red flag. We also know that white America is not coming to save us. I'm a licensed social worker who worked in child protection for 17 years. I can personally speak to the trauma kids have experienced. We have been in a crisis for some time with domestic violence and mental health. I know we need to take it on as a crisis. We need to develop some solutions to avoid any further tragedy. Also from Miss Sharon Evans, she says, Dear Roland S. Martin, thank you for being so much for having these discussions about domestic violence. I've been so angry about all of these murders and violence against women, especially women of color. It seems like every day I hear about another domestic violence case. You're right that this is a mental health problem. If we don't deal with this horrific problem, we will be talking about another woman and mother being killed. Black women have been angry for so long about not being treated with any respect. It's hard to find any sympathy for the abuser, but we have to understand that their life experiences lead to their horrible choices. All right, that is what we do here on the show. Now, still to come on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we with Congressman Bobby Scott talking about Virginia, this upcoming election tomorrow, so stay with us.
MAGA Republicans ended diversity programs, cut funding for Black students, and fired federal employees. And they won't stop there. Now, they've redrawn congressional maps so that they can rig the November elections. But we have the power to stop them. By voting yes for fair elections, we have the final say on who represents us in Congress. This is a temporary measure to restore fairness. They are not backing down, and neither can we. Make a plan to vote by April 21st and vote yes for fair elections.
I'm Mark Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League, and I'm watching the Black Star Network.
All right, Virginia voters will head to the polls on Tuesday to decide on whether to temporarily empower the Democratic-led legislature to redraw congressional and legislative districts ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Here's a comparison of the current congressional district map and how it would change if Virginians would approve the new map. Virginia's 11 congressional districts are updated every 10 years by the Virginia Redistricting Commission, which is composed of 8 legislators and 8 citizens with equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. The latest redistricting occurred in 2021, and the next will be in 2031. If the amendment passes, Virginia will have 10 congressional districts. Congressman Bobby Scott joins us now. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, Candace, it's good to be with you.
Yeah, so listen, this is very significant. And we're talking about something that started with Texas and California and people really rising to the occasion to kind of take the chances. And I'm wondering, do you think that this particular kind of flipping potentially sets a precedent that we're going to just see this over and over again in terms of somebody taking this into their hands and saying, we're going to flip it?
Well, hopefully it won't go on, but while it's going on, we can't sit back like chumps and let them take seats. You said it started in Texas. Well, actually, it started last election in North Carolina, where they started with a 7-7 delegation, and as the voters went to the polls and elected a Democrat for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, they ended up with 10 Republicans and only 4 Democrats. Those 3 seats were just not partisan. It turned into policy because all of the major policy initiatives in this Congress have been decided by those 3 votes, like the big ugly bill, decided by those 3 votes, where they took away your health care, your SNAP benefits to give tax cuts to the wealthy. They've been dismantling the Department of Education. They couldn't do that with no questions if we had those 3 votes back. ICE is going around shooting people, no questions asked. And we could make sure that we were in the majority and could subpoena people if they wouldn't answer questions. Voter suppression. The House passed the worst voter suppression bill in recent history, the SAVE Act. And it passed by just a couple of votes. If we had those 3 votes back, that bill never would have come up. And so that's what's really at risk. They went with those 3 votes, then they went to Texas, like you said, Missouri, back to North Carolina to pick up another seat. There's a special election already scheduled in Florida. They have threatened to find 2, 3, maybe 4 additional seats. And we will never catch up. We'll never be able to hold this administration accountable unless we respond in kind. They get all mad and say it's not fair for Virginia to do this, but Virginia is now doing exactly the same thing they did in North Carolina, in Texas, in Minnesota, back in North Carolina, Missouri. They're waiting for a Supreme Court case to see if they're going to eliminate seats in Louisiana and Alabama, and there is a pattern with the way they're doing it. 4 of the 5 seats in Texas are represented today by blacks and Hispanics. The seat that they took in Missouri, represented by a member of the Black Caucus. In North Carolina, a member of the Black Caucus. They're looking at Black Caucus seats in Louisiana and Alabama. And there's another difference between the way they're doing it. They're talking about we're overturning the will of the people. We're having a referendum that is the will of the people. What they did in Texas, Missouri, and going to do in Florida, did in North Carolina, behind closed doors, they just did it. California and Virginia have had referendums so the voters could decide what they wanted to do. All we're doing is leveling the playing field, so as important issues come up, we will have a level playing field, not a playing field where they have stolen 4, 5, 6, 8, 12 seats in order to continue doing what they've been doing.
Now, certainly we expect litigation, I would imagine. What are your thoughts about that and what litigation will do to this process, if anything at all?
Well, they're gonna sue, but I don't think they'd have much of a case. We're doing exactly the same thing that other states have done. We're complying with our constitutional process for amending the Constitution to temporarily suspend the commission so that we can do exactly what they've done in other states. And it's incredible to watch this bunch talk about, we've seen ads talking about black voting rights and how they may be jeopardized if this passes. This is a group that, like I said, has eliminated seats already, several seats represented by African Americans. They passed the SAVE Act, the worst voter suppression bill in recent history, and they're going to think people are going to think they have any interest at all in voting rights for African Americans. This is leveling the playing field so that we can actively participate in the legislative process and talk about issues that are important to the community.
I think we have time for one question from our panel. Dr. Dibinga, you have a question.
Thank you so much for your continued efforts in fighting for the people. I wanted to know on the national level, given how you broke things down, do you feel that Trump and Republicans overall are losing this redistricting fight on a national level? I know we talk state by state, but going forward, how do you see this playing out?
Well, if you add them all up, it's if Virginia passes a referendum, it'll be about a wash. It'll be close. But to show you how weak their argument is, they've gone around sending out flyers suggesting that Barack Obama and Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger are opposing the referendum when both are on ads supporting it. It just shows you how corrupt and weak their argument is. They have to resort to misinformation to try to fool people out of their votes. But if you add them up, Texas 5, Missouri, North Carolina, couple potentially in Florida, Louisiana, Alabama. They weakened 2 districts in Ohio, and the only ones that have responded are California with 5 and Virginia with 4. It's close depending on what happens the rest of the year, but we need to make sure we have a level playing field. We can never stop them from cutting health care, abolishing the Department of Education, going to war we lost the war resolution by those 3 votes we lost in North Carolina last election, and they're trying to add more. All we're doing is leveling the playing field so we can have a fair vote on these important issues.
Thelma.
One question that I have pertaining to how do the voters put the pressure on the individuals that we have elected for these positions to let them know this is what we want? Because if we don't strike now, in your opinion, what do you project that is going to happen if we continue to sit on the sidelines and not take the strikes that we need in order for us to get the results of leveling the playing field?
Well, if we sit back like chumps and let them pick up seat after seat, then obviously we'll be at a severe disadvantage. There's one thing I'd like to hold Republicans accountable for, and that's the misinformation. When they mail flyers into the community that affirmatively misrepresent the position of Barack Obama and Governor Spanberger, we need to make all Republicans accountable. Either they disavow these ads or they own the ads. So the next time they come to the community, we can ask them about misinformation and why they inflicted that kind of information on our community. The best way we can hold them accountable short term is to make sure we come out and vote, don't guess, vote yes tomorrow and with this referendum.
All right, Nicole.
Yeah, as you mentioned, this initiative is happening at a time when multiple states, red and blue, are redrawing their maps. So I'm curious to know what you think. Is this a moment that reflects a breakdown of neutral redistricting principles? Or has this been happening all along and now Democrats are finally starting to fight back?
Well, yeah, it's broken down because you've resorted to partisan redistricting. But if they're doing it and we don't do it, we'd be at a severe disadvantage and we'll never be able to catch up. There is legislation pending right now in Congress to prohibit partisan gerrymandering. And I don't think there's a single Republican supporting it at this point. If we want to get rid of partisan gerrymandering, I'm all for it. Let's have fair maps. But if they're going to gerrymander and expect us to sit back and just watch, then we'll get what we've gotten so far. Those 3 seats that they got in North Carolina, when they went from 7-7 to 10-4, as the voters were voting statewide on a Democrat for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, we've lost so many different issues. The SAVE Act we lost because they passed that. They passed that big ugly bill. We lost the War Powers Act, which would have stopped the war cold turkey unless Trump came to Congress to get permission according to the Constitution. You're paying all this much higher gas prices because of the war. We could stop the war, but we can't because we don't have those 3 votes. We can't sit back and let them gerrymander districts and pick up seats and just sit back like chumps and not do anything.
All right, Congressman Bobby Scott, thank you so much for being with us tonight. For those folks who did not actually vote early, they're going in tomorrow. Thank you so much again.
Don't guess, vote yes.
All right, all right. All right, folks, it's time for headlines with Brittany Noble.
Singer David Burke, known professionally as David, has been charged with murder in connection with the death of a 14-year-old girl. Celeste Hernandez was found dismembered more than a year after she was reported missing, and police discovered her body in the trunk of Burke's Tesla on September 8, 2025. They were alerted to a foul odor coming from an impounded vehicle at a Los Angeles tow yard. Authorities indicated that her remains were not intact and had likely been in the Tesla for an extended period of time. Burke, 21 years old, was arrested last week in relation to her death. In addition to the first-degree murder charge, she faces accusations of lewd and sexual acts with a minor and mutilating human remains. New York City police officers are currently under investigation following a violent arrest captured on camera at a wine shop in Brooklyn on April 14th. The New York Police Department confirmed that the incident occurred during an undercover drug operation in the Burham Hill neighborhood. The video shows officers approaching a man who matched the suspect's description. The footage reveals that the officers punched, kneed, and threw the man into a rack of wine bottles. People then can be heard telling the officers that the man was not resisting arrest. As he lay bleeding on the floor, the man repeatedly said, "It's not me," even after he was handcuffed. The video appears to show one officer stomping on his body. The NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau is now investigating this incident, and the officers involved have been placed on modified duty, and their firearms and badges have been removed. In Illinois, a pair of white brothers and their friend are facing hate crime charges after allegedly attacking 3 black men, including a city councilman, who were fishing at a park April 3rd. Well, Jaden Reynolds, along with brothers Jesse and Jordan Coleman, they're accused of harassing Illinois Councilman Jaleel Jones and his friends Dejon King and Dwan Williams. Well, black men reported that the white men who had been drinking started to harass them and use racial slurs. At one point, the white men threatened, "We will blow your heads off." And Jordan began firing gunshots into the air. In response, according to prosecutors, one of the black men fired back in self-defense before everyone fled the scene and called 911. Reynolds and Coleman brothers are currently in jail and are scheduled to return to court this week. Disturbing details are raising serious questions in the Louisiana case involving a teacher caught on camera assaulting a young child. The incident occurred in 2023 at Ball Elementary School in Ball, Louisiana. Surveillance video shows the former teacher, Stephanie Robertson, throwing a small child to the ground after he got out of his seat. Now, when the kid climbed back onto the desk, Robertson escalates the situation by chasing him and grabbing him by the collar and dragging him into the hallway. She later resigned, and Robertson still holds a valid teaching license that extends to 2027. Still, police issued only a misdemeanor citation, and the case has been cited in the mayor's court for years. Now the child's father is suing the school board, the town of Ball, and prosecutors claiming that his son is traumatized and demanding accountability. During the period of racial reckoning, Harvard University took a leading role among American colleges and universities. In 2022, the institution committed $100 million to the Harvard and Legacy of Slavery Initiative. The initiative was established to research, document, and acknowledge Harvard's deep financial and intellectual connections to slavery. It aimed to address historical injustices through concrete actions, such as supporting descendant communities. Well, just 4 years later, the initiative appears to be in disarray. The Guardian reported that 3 faculty members and the executive director have stepped down, while 11 researchers have been dismissed. In their public statements, the faculty members indicated that the university attempted to dilute their efforts to build relationships with the descendants of those whose enslavement benefited the university financially. Also, Mississippi's Jackson University has appointed Dr. Denise Jones Gregory as its 14th president, making her the first alumna to lead the HBCU. Her appointment aims to bring an end to years of instability at the university, which, like many HBCUs all across the country, is facing declining enrollment and other structural challenges. Since 2016, the school has experienced multiple presidential transitions, some of which are quite traumatic and disruptive. Well, Dr. Gregory earned her undergraduate degree in chemistry from Jackson State University before obtaining a doctorate from the Georgia Institute of Technology. She then returned to Jackson State, where she had held positions as both provost and vice president of academic affairs and has served as interim president. Dr. Gregory will officially assume her role as president on May 1st. Roland.
All right. Make sure to watch Brittany Noble Monday through Friday at noon. That does it for Roland Martin Unfiltered. I want to thank him for trusting me in his seat this week. I also want to thank my panel, Dr. Omakongo Dibinga, Thelma Anderson, and Nicole Robinson for joining us tonight. Now, your support is critical to what we do. You can support us via Cash App using the Stripe code at the bottom left-hand corner. You can also help us with credit cards. Use the same thing. PayPal's R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo's RM Unfiltered. Zelle and RolandsMartin.com, rolling at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. And if you're old school, you can send a check. Money order payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered, P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037. Stay with us. There's going to be more on Roland Martin Unfiltered, certainly during the week as we address the issue of domestic violence and how to deal with the trauma. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I will see you tomorrow night.